Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today on Nature Day at the COP28 at AIB's Pavilion for this excellent event on harnessing nature's power, exploring challenges and opportunities in nature as infrastructure. So before I invite the panelists on stage, I would like to welcome you to join me in watching a short video that we have prepared. Thanks. So with that, let me invite the speakers on stage. Please, Professor Kongjiang Yu, Mr. Jumping Tia, Madame Marie Bjornson Langen, and Mr. Adonai Herrera Martinez, please. Welcome. Karangwa, please join us on stage. You arrived just in time. Great. So, good morning again, everyone, distinguished audience and panelists. My name is Shani Zhou. I am a Strategy and Policy Senior Officer on Nature and ESG at the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And so today's event is addressing the topic of nature as infrastructure, and in a very interesting setting, the COP28 Nature Day, right? Which couldn't be more appropriate in highlighting the interrelatedness of these topics of climate change, nature, and biodiversity. And we have here with us a distinguished panel coming from multiple disciplines of finance, international and bilateral financing institutions, as well as urban design and international organizations. So just to kick off the discussion, AIIB has recently launched its Climate Action Plan in September, where we promote a truly holistic approach in terms of achieving climate mitigation, adaptation, co-benefits, and addressing the global challenge of biodiversity loss. And this kind of approach, we also have continue to address in the Nature's Infrastructure Report, which was launched at the COP28 first week by our economics department, which JP will talk about. But before moving on to that, I would like to invite Mr. Charles Karangwa, the Global Head of Nature-Based Solutions at the International Union for Conservation of Nature, to speak a bit about nature-based solutions. Because IUCN was one of the early pioneers of the concept of NBS, I believe almost 20 years ago. So I would like to invite Charles to give us some insight on how he sees the evolution of the concept of NBS and the understanding around NBS over the last 20-ish years, and especially in the wake of the global biodiversity framework. Thanks.
Thank you for having me, and I'm very pleased to be on the same panel with Professor KG, whom together with Peking University and the school he is dean for, we are launching very soon a groundbreaking innovation center that exactly supports institutions like AIB and others to develop sound and transformative, but also scalable nature-based solution projects, including infrastructure. So I'm very happy to be with him, and thanks for inviting me. I just wanted to say, I think it's good recognizing that nature-based solution is no longer a concept just to talk about. It's rather a framework that has been now uptaken by multiple actors, including development finance institutions. And this is not just happening from scratch. This is a work that has really taken quite a long time to have this particular concept established within the global development practitioners. Over the last 10 years, what was a concept indeed, now it's a framework for climate, for biodiversity, but also for sustainable development investments. And recently, actually last year, we have seen a broadly intergovernmental uptake of this concept, an endorsement by the UN Environmental Assembly, which gave actually a very nice framing, because all this was going towards today, the definition of nature-based solution under UNEA resolution was endorsed by governments, and that gives it already a legitimacy to be a concept or a framework that can be scaled up. And the good thing is, when the definition was endorsed by the governments, because governments, whenever they decide something, it becomes a rule, it becomes a law, it has to be done. We have seen a tremendous uptake also to include nature-based solutions in other Rio conventions. Only until COP27, we did not have nature-based solution in the UN climate language. Now we have it. In December last year in Montreal, we, for the first time, had nature-based solution in the language of global biodiversity framework, coming as a concept or a framework that actually brings together the three Rio conventions: the Convention on Climate Change, Convention on Biodiversity, and the Convention on Combating Land Desertification. But also, in May last year, again, we saw an uptake of this particular concept within other multilateral environmental agreements like the Wetlands Ramsar Convention. They passed a resolution which says that Ramsar conventions, particularly wetland sites, are infrastructure, are green or ecological infrastructure that are very, very important for sustainable development. So I wanted to say it's just no longer a concept. And we have seen that financial institutions, private corporate institutions, big corporate. I just came back from a big conversation where we had corporate like PepsiCo and the other big companies talking about scaling up nature-based solutions. But what does that really mean in a sense? What it means is we are elevating the role of nature to make infrastructure more resilient and sustainable. We are elevating the role of nature to be considered as a core asset, investable asset that we need to protect, conserve, and sustainably manage as a key partner to development pathways. So it's just beyond biodiversity. It is important. It's beyond absorbing more emissions, because nature-based solution, of course, can play a role in contributing to climate mitigation. But it's also how we look at the derivatives from these ecosystem services, water, which is a very important asset for development in agriculture, infrastructure, in urbanization. And unless we consider nature, especially basins and watersheds, as a core infrastructure, as a core basic capital, I think we are losing the sense of a combined economic understanding. So I would just stop there by saying that when I sit on a panel like this, where we talk to financial institutions, I think it's a game changer. We are seeing that as a driving force towards increasing even financial flows to nature-based solutions. Because for the first time, many banks are now integrating this particular topic. Only two things that we need to be careful about. Let's not greenwash. Let's not just use this concept to forgive our emissions and to think that it's going to just replace phasing out, rapid phase out of fossil fuels and coal and other emissions. Let's not think nature-based solution can replace energy transitions, just energy transitions. Let's not think that nature-based solution is just a bullet magic point into addressing climate crisis that we are seeing. So we need that nature-based solution, yes, it can play a big role, but we need to continue to do more and more and more on other climate transitions.
Really, I think, Charles, you really made a very on-point observation about, in order to mainstream nature-based solutions, right, we need to elevate the importance into the economic and financial discussions. And I think later on speakers will speak about the importance of economic valuation in infrastructure projects and also in decision-making and in developed and developing countries. But before going there, I would like to now turn to Mr. Professor Yu Kongjian, who is Oberlander Prize Laureate and Professor and Dean of the College of Architecture and Landscape Architecture at the Peking University in Beijing, and the founder of the Terranscape Design Institute. Professor Yu, you are the father of the concept Sponge Cities. And actually, you have pioneered the use of nature-based solutions in over, by now, I believe, more than 200 cities in China. So we would really love to hear, in complement to Charles' high-level observations, what has been your experience at the local level, and what were some of the initial challenges that you had to overcome in getting buy-in at the local level?
Well, as Charles mentioned, that nature can provide all kinds of services. And these services are free services, right? Provision, producing food, water, regulating stormwater, flood, drought, free. And also biodiversity, they're life-supporting, and also beauty, right? Spiritual needs. So this is what nature can provide free services as infrastructure. Well, it's a great infrastructure. You guys invest so much, right? Pipe system, dam, concrete, dike, high flood walls, billions of dollars every year. And that create 8% carbon emission. You imagine 8% carbon emission. And it's still going to increase because 80% of the global surfaces is underdeveloped. India will get developed. Africa will get developed. We're going to invest more and it create more carbon emission. So the alternative is green solution, which means nature as infrastructure. And Sponge City is water-oriented infrastructure, which means you can think about nature can retain water itself, like Amazon River. It can like sponge, and it can regulate stormwater and also drought. Today, the whole globe suffering the dry out of groundwater, the whole globe. And that also contributed to sea level rising. Imagine sea level rising because we drain away all the flood water. 40% of the sea level rising is contributed from the drainage from the land. That's why we have the alternative, holistic nature-based solution. So you're talking about local and I'm thinking global actually, right? You imagine. But the local knowledge is so important. We are talking about great infrastructure, the urban infrastructure. It is mainly invented from the early developed areas, Netherlands, England, France. So European countries actually invented the urbanism great infrastructure. But listen, European regions used to be very mild in climate, right? So when we copied this kind of infrastructure to the region like China, India, the monsoon region, the Asian monsoon region, all city fails. 65% of Chinese city fail because we copied this kind of infrastructure, right? 65%. And almost all monsoon cities fail. Indonesia fails. They have to move the capital, imagine. Yeah? So this kind of infrastructure will fail or have failed. Are you going to invest more? You will be failed again. Right? So that's local and global. Because the local climate change and monsoon climate is climate change, okay? For 1,000 years, we suffered monsoon climate. We suffered climate change. But locally, we developed this wisdom, the ancient wisdom, which is based on nature. For thousands of years, China have developed this nature-based water management system without pipe. Remember, without pipe, without concrete drainage system. And the city survived very well. Why did they fail? Because we use this kind of great infrastructure that had no resilience at all, no resilience at all. And today, the European country also suffering monsoon climate because of climate change. Now that's why the local experience from China or from other part of monsoon region will be a major contribution to solve today's climate problem. That's my point, yeah.
Thank you, Professor Yu. I think you really told us the importance basically to not just the linkage between local and global, right? But also over time, we need to go back in history and remember that nature as infrastructure has been there for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and providing free ecosystem services that nowadays we try to replicate with great infrastructure and arguably in some cases not so efficiently. So I think what you're telling us is that we need to go back and use the ancient kind of nature-based solutions / techniques in order to mix it with the modern way. So,
well, it's not just use it. It needs to be upgraded. Need to be designed. Use modern science, modern technology. It is a combination.
A combination.
Yeah, it is a combination. It's upgraded. The ancient nature-based solution to design. But I don't have time to talk about how we upgrade it. But we implement this technology in more than 200 cities.
Yeah.
And they have been tested and perform very well.
Yeah, I think we would welcome sharing those experiences in the second round of questions. And then now let me move on to Mr. Jianping Tia. JP, commonly known as JP, is the lead economist and manager of the AIB Economics Department, who is the mastermind behind the Asian Infrastructure Finance Report on nature as infrastructure. And so, JP, I would like to invite you to tell us what is nature as infrastructure, and also how can nature provide critical infrastructure functions while promoting sustainable development?
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you for bringing us together. I think in the AIB's report, Nature as Infrastructure, we highlight two concepts. The first one is, like Charles or like Professor Yu mentioned, just a nature-based solution and scaling that up. That is the first component of nature-based infrastructure, nature-based solution. The second component of nature as infrastructure is to fundamentally invest in nature for all the service itself. Not necessarily having to integrate into infrastructure solution, invest in conservation, invest in woodland for the fundamental kind of ecological services that it provides. Nature is the most important infrastructure. So I think that is the elevation of the concept that we are trying to bring in the report. But let me also highlight a few things, maybe even though it's not asked by the moderator, I'll highlight a little bit on the challenges. I agree with the panelists, but I'll just highlight some challenges. Today, nature-based solutions attract about $130 billion of financing a year. So that's based on a UN report, $130 billion of financing a year for nature-based solution, all the things that you mentioned, right? So I wondered how large is the 130 billion. So I tried to find out. So it turns out that we, the world, spends $110 billion on coffee every year. So you may argue that we spend too much on coffee. So I've been asking myself as an economist, am I willing to sacrifice my latte every day to invest in nature? And I find it a struggle. So where I'm trying to come from with that tongue-in-cheek example is to say that Professor Yu mentioned that nature is free. So for economists, what is free, what is unpriced, makes it very difficult. It makes it very difficult to really access all the prices of the solutions and the benefits of the solutions because it's free, right? You do not have very strong matrix to, when you say sponge city, how much flood water it says, it is free. Nobody's paying. You cannot observe it. You have to find a lot of matrix. And secondly, when it is unpriced, it makes it very hard to monetize and very hard to channel financial flows. And it explains why only $130 billion is spent on nature-based solution every year. Paulson Institute says it should be 700 billion. UN says it should be 500 billion. Anyway, the number is 3 or 4 times necessary. So I think in our report, we try to present some solutions, and we together as a group need to present some solutions to find a way to measure and find a way to monetize. That remains a challenge going forward to scale up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, JP. Now I would like to invite Madame Marie Björnsson-Langen from the Agence Française de Développement. Marie is the Deputy Executive Director of Operations in Sustainable Development. And as we know, the IFD operates in many developing countries in the global south. So I would like to turn to Marie with the question of sharing with us the IFD's experience on what are the available NBSs in the developing countries, and how has AFD promoted the uptake of NBS in developing countries, and share some of the lessons. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your invitation and for giving us the opportunity to bring us together and to give us the opportunity to present our strategy and our operations on the ground. First of all, I would like to say a few words about our strategy and ambition. As you probably know, IFD has been the first PDB to commit to be 100% Paris aligned since 2017. And now IFD is working towards being aligned with the GBF within 5 years, so in 2027. We know that the fight against climate warming cannot succeed if natural ecosystems are forever degraded, and maintaining functional ecosystems capable of providing their services is part of the solution for meeting the climate challenge. In our efforts, in IFD's effort to make the convergence of biodiversity and climate agendas a success, we have set ambitious objectives. The first one is to double the group direct contribution to biodiversity from $500 million in 2020 to $1 billion by 2025 through mainstreaming biodiversity into all sectors, all projects that we finance, And we are well on track to meet this objective this year. In 2022, biodiversity finance reached 736 million euros, which is an increase of 24% regarding 2021. A lot of figures, I'm sorry, but it's just to give you an overview, an idea of what do we do. And our second objective is to dedicate 30% of climate finance dedicated to each project that also benefit biodiversity to enhance the convergence between climate and biodiversity financing. And this objective was already met in 2021. With this target, we finance projects dedicated to biodiversity, but we also encourage mainstreaming of biodiversity in all sectors, particularly in water, sanitation, agriculture, and urban development. In this perspective, we believe that NBS are a very, very important lever to reach these objectives and tackle together the climate and biodiversity crisis. I will answer your question now and go more deeply into details and what we do on the ground. Of course, we know that developing countries are facing the impacts of climate change and the loss of biodiversity. But NBS are opportunities to improve the resilience of territories and populations by preserving nature and ecosystem services. And AFD is already deeply involved in projects with NBS in the country where we operate, especially in agriculture, water, sanitation, and urban development, as I said before. I would just give you some examples of the project that we finance. For instance, we have been supporting projects to fight against coastal erosion through the restoration of mangroves in Cambodia. Another example in Senegal, we finance a project to promote better use of water resources and fight against soil erosion by developing more suitable agricultural practices and appropriate anti-erosion devices such as plant wind breaks or plant cover. And also in the urban context, we have been working with the Kaidan district in Wuhan in China to restore water quality and limit impact of flooding through green-gray infrastructure. I can give you more details about this project during the discussion if you want. But having said that, and despite the cost effectiveness of NBS, some obstacles remain to scale up, and we have identified some obstacles. The first one is to continue to work both on incentives and on regulation and to fight against negative perceptions. NBS are sometimes seen as less efficient than the grey infrastructure, and we have to fight against this. There is also a lack of skills and concepts, and we see also that NBS are often seen as too risky than grey infrastructure. So we also have to provide knowledge and to prove that it's not the case, or it shouldn't be the case, actually. And in this context, I just would like to conclude to say that the role of a DFI such as AFD in promoting NBS can be to first mainstream NBS in all sectors. That's what we try to do in our projects on the ground. Mm-hmm. Also to incorporate supports and to provide technical assistance for project preparation and to implement pipelines, DFI's pipelines. Also, we have to promote standards to ensure the dissemination and the appropriation of the context. And as you know, AFD has been an important financial contributor to EUCN global standards. We also have to advise government to develop policies and regulation, and as a DFI to de-risk also the investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie, for giving us this holistic picture of how if they integrate the climate and tackling climate and biodiversity concerns both at the high level by setting holistic targets, but also at the project level in different countries in Southeast Asia as well as in China. And I think that some of the elements that you mentioned are also in line with the latest thinking of the MDBs and the MDB Nature Working Group in particular, where Adonai represents the EBRD. And so I think that's a natural transition to our last but not least speaker, Mr. Adonai Herrera Martinez, who is the director of the EBRD Environmental and Sustainability Department. And I think Adonai and EBRD has been one of the leaders in kind of making the linkage between promoting nature and promoting biodiversity integration. And so my question to you, Adonai, is how do you see the synergies between what previous speakers have talked about on NBS, as well as making sure that we achieve the biodiversity goals and targets under the GBF? And also, as a peer MDB, I would also like to invite you to comment on the AIF if you have any feedback on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sunny. Well, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the close collaboration. I think AIB is becoming our closest MDB in the sphere of nature, and I think you're being too kind. We're not one of the leaders, but we might be one of the most enthusiastic partners across the MDBs in the work for nature. Let me start by quoting Sir Danny Alexander when he came and spoke at the EBRD annual meeting last year this year in Samarkand. Time flies. Nature is the infrastructure of life. And that places AIIB as infrastructure band in a very good position to become the leader of investing in nature, in nature-based solutions, but not just in nature-based solutions. And that takes me to the point on definitions. And I tend to prioritize action over definitions, but I think in this case it's important to look at definitions. And I think Charles made a good point. We need to distinguish between what biodiversity is, which is the variety of plants and animals in a world or in a certain habitat. So basically, and since we have a professor of architecture here, is actually the group of people living in a building, right? As opposed to ecosystem, which is the biological community interacting, of organisms interacting between themselves and their physical environment. So basically, the building and the dwellers is the ecosystem, right? Nature is the aggregate of that ecosystem, the quarter of those buildings, and the people inside. And nature-based solutions are the sustainable use of nature to tackle a socio-economic issue, basically the jobs that those people are doing, right? So yes, nature-based solutions are key action to scale up nature finance, but it's not the only solution, right? So we need to look at investing in nature in a holistic manner, going beyond nature-based solutions. That's my personal opinion. And that's where the AIIB's Nature as Infrastructure report comes in so handy. And I need to commend your team, JP, and the AIIB for such a comprehensive report on what investing in nature means, right? Because you provide clarifications on those distinctions, but also very good examples on all dimensions that drive nature action. So your report promises to be our bedside reading for people working in nature for a long, long time. And in your report, you make the distinction, and with this I want to finish, between two complementary approaches, which is the integration of nature within our investments, within infrastructure. So basically, how to integrate biodiversity net gains in the investments we do. And I think the example of the UK Department for Environment, Food and Regional Affairs, I think UK DEFRA, is a good one that commits to achieve 10%, at least 10% net gains in all infrastructure investments. Is a good benchmark. Now the EU is revising, is drafting its nature restoration law aiming at 30%. In line with the 30 by 30 target. So that's basically integrating nature in what we invest, as opposed or complementary to investing in nature to provide a service, nature-based solutions. So we need to tackle both, and both are very effective channels to achieve the target 2 of the GBF, of the Global Biodiversity Framework. That is the 30 by 30 restoration target. And with this, pass on the microphone to you again.
Yes, thank you, Adonai. It's really, I think many of us, when we think about nature and biodiversity, right, we think of them as the same thing, but actually your intervention also helped to clarify some of the differences, and sometimes there may even be trade-offs. Using nature-based solutions may harm biodiversity if we plant the wrong kind of trees in certain places. So I think your point about the UK's experience and promoting net gains is something we should all consider integrating into our respective policies and strategies. With that, I would like to move on to the second part of the panel. So having set the scene and speakers, given us an introduction of NBS and their work in this particular field, how can we work together more across these institutions, but also more broadly across the stakeholder groups and the global north and south to effectively scale up the use of NBS and other solutions to achieve the biodiversity and climate goals, and more broader, the 17 SDGs. So I would like to come back to Marie, actually, because I think, again, AFD is one of the poster children of this kind of integrated approach, and you illustrated to us already the mainstreaming that you're doing at the target setting level, as well as projects. But it would be great to hear a bit more about how some of the case studies in your portfolio have been used to achieve adaptation, mitigation, perhaps biodiversity co-benefits. If you can illustrate to us a bit more, yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I mentioned a lot of points in the first part, but going more into details and to answer your question, I just would like to say again that the mainstreaming of biodiversity in AFD activity is a major importance for us after having been the first PDB to commit the 100% Paris aligned. And now we have a new roadmap on climate and on nature, on climate and biodiversity, which is under discussion and should be approved at the beginning of next year. And this new roadmap showcases the importance of that objective. As we know, the agreement reached at COP15 in Montreal was an historic turning point, and it concerns us first as a donor. We will have to mobilize $30 billion between now and 2013 to developing countries. So, as I said before, our figures towards biodiversity are very good and are on track for 2023. Our forecasts are over 1 billion euro, excluding our subsidiary on the private sector, Proparco. And just a few words about our new strategy and new roadmap, which aims to promote greener societies and economy. We would like to underline 4 objectives. The first one is to target and to achieve this ambitious target of 1 billion, but it's also to have a global approach and to integrate biodiversity into all AFD activities, and to underline the fact that preservation and restoration of terrestrial and marine ecosystem to support the target of 30% protection by 2030. It's a very important objective for us. We also have to take into account nature-related risk, and it's the third objective of this roadmap. And lastly, as a DFI, we also have to support partner countries through long-term strategy, which is also a very, very important objective. As of now, in order to meet the GBF, we have also integrated NBS into all activities for this new roadmap. We recognize that NBS is a very important lever to mainstream biodiversity and climate simultaneously. The climate and the biodiversity crisis, as it has been said before by my the other panelists. And we also would like to promote and scaling up NBS in our operation through the identification of guidelines and standard to operationalize NBS on the ground. Yes, that's the main thing I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Yes, I am coming back to Adonai because I'm aware he has to leave quickly, so apologies to the right-hand side of the panel. But so EBRD has launched its Nature Action Plan actually this morning, just before this panel. And EBRD's main operations are in the private sector, right? So in particular, I would like to ask now Adonai to elaborate on how you think yourselves, but also other MDBs with private sector operations such as ourselves, we also have a 50% private capital mobilization target by 2030. So how can MDBs work better with the private sector to provide the incentives for scaling up NBS while simultaneously achieving the very important biodiversity net gains that you alluded to?
Yeah, thank you, Sani, and apologies for derailing a bit your order. I do need to be in the Nature Positive Pavilion at 12. And when kind of framing this question, Sani was asking about the journey that EBRD has gone through for the last few years, right? And she knows I'm a traveler, so I like to speak about journeys and talk about the journey. When we brought the blue economy first and the nature topic to the EBRD, it was received with very much eye-rolling by bankers. You know, EBRD is a private sector-focused institution, so project finance, doing project finance in former Soviet Union. It wasn't a natural kind of theme for us, for our bankers to look into. But luckily, we persevered. And if I can take one piece of credit, is to realize that we had a very paradigmatic example of both blue economy and nature financing in the Northern Dimension Environmental Partnership, a partnership created in 2001 to basically redress ecosystem degradation around the Baltic Sea due to eutrophication, right? Due to wastewater treatment wastewater being released untreated. So basically, along the years, we managed to basically turn around the situation of, especially of the Gulf of Finland. So we realized that we had a very good example, and based on that, we joined the other NDBs ahead of COP26 in Glasgow in 2021, and put together an NDB statement for nature, people, and planet, which basically summarize the different dimensions we needed to act on to scale up nature action, right? 5 different dimensions, from safeguards to finance to partnerships, evaluation of natural capital, and data disclosure, right? And on safeguards, we are updating our environmental social policy, trying to be more robust in our do no harm principles. Finance, I'll leave it for the end. Partnerships, now at the COP28, we've launched together with our friends from AFD, the Blue Mediterranean Partnership. We've been working on that front in replicating the Baltic example to the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean, and expanding the concept to broader blue economy activities, not just wastewater treatment and circular economy, but sustainable tourism, offshore renewable energy, sustainable aquaculture, for example. Then on natural capital valuation, we've developed a model that we're coupling with our work on TCFD and TNFD in order to translate nature-related risks into financial risks, because ultimately that's what we want to do with the TNFD approach, right? And on finance, and I think that's probably the elephant in the room, how can we do more on financing nature? Because financing nature faces typically a major barrier. Investments have very little returns that make them hardly bankable very often, right? So there is an emerging understanding of how to use nature to mitigate risks. We were talking about mangroves in protecting us against sea surges. But if we want to mobilize the private sector in actually scaling up nature, we need to create revenue streams and business models that will repay nature positive action, right? So the MDB collaboration is essential to create markets that would create those revenue streams to compensate the private sector action, right? And promote business models that would be based in the use of nature. And think about the Red Sea coral reefs, right? Think about the tens of thousands, well, the thousands of businesses and tens of thousands of families that depend on the sustainable tourism services that those risks provides, from hotels to diving centers and the people working there, right? So we need to collectively help develop those business models and services and practices that preserve, restore, and sustainably manage that natural capital, right? So jointly, and with this I conclude, we need to collaborate in creating those demonstration projects that showcase how to invest in nature in a sustainable manner and help establish the markets, both the carbon markets, carbon removal markets linked to the net zero pledges, and the biodiversity markets, complex topic, but very important, I think Charles mentioned it, to make sure that with our market power, we internalize those positive environmental externalities that we're trying to capture. And I think with this, I can pass on the microphone. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Adonai, and please feel free if you anytime. But I really thank you so much for being here with us. And so Adonai has shared a couple of examples from Europe, right, from the Nordic Sea and also the Mediterranean. But I want to take us back now to the region which is where most of AIB's clients are as well, in Asia, and turn back to Professor Yu to ask whether your experience in China is somewhat similar. Do you see the different dimensions that Adonai was mentioning? For example, we need to create markets, and then previously also mentioned the capacity building component, which Mary said is very, very important. The knowledge of technical experts, understanding of NBS can be a barrier or an enabling factor. And other kind of dimensions. Do you see this as already existent in China in a way? Do you see China being a little bit more further down the line in the development based on your experience in Chinese cities?
You mean how can we make this as an investment, a way of you can return, you can measurable as a colleague?
Either financially or economically speaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, nature is free. How can you invest in something free? You cannot make any money, right? That's challenging, of course. But when you're talking about infrastructure, usually spatially, physically, it's not just anywhere, right? We have to invest in some critical pattern. It needs to be planned and it needs to be designed so that the investment is most efficient, most effective. You need a high performance, right? High performance. That's I call the security pattern. Critical, like infrastructure, right? A certain area. It's not just a whole global service. You need to invest some critical areas. So the investment can get a return in the economic term, right? For example, in all my cases, we invest in the river corridor, for example, sponge city, in the middle of the city, or in the green infrastructure in the middle of the city, which means when you invest it is measurable. You can actually increase the property value dramatically. Like in Sanya city, for my cases, so in 4 years, the property value quadruple. 400 times increase in 4 years. And in Haikou, the same case, double the property value. Because all the river, which used to be paved with concrete, almost all of the Chinese rivers in the city is concrete. And also in other countries, in Mexico, you are seeing it. And those rivers, those drainage systems, they have no value in terms of biodiversity, in terms of resiliency, adapting to stormwater, also in terms of beauty. recreational use. So when you transform those gray into green, you will increase property, you increase the value of the whole area. It certainly increase the nature capital and the services, economic service. And but economically in this area is dramatically dramatical. Yeah. So that's, I think that's a Chinese experience. And certainly in China, the investment come from the central government or also government, also local government. And they don't want to return, okay? They don't want to return. This capital don't want to return in terms of individual property. But as I said, they actually increase the property value and also create other measurable economic value, such as tourism, yeah. And also it reduces the investment for great infrastructure. Now that's another measurable economic value, yeah.
JP, please.
Let me make an important, I hope what is an important distinction. What is nature-based solution versus nature as infrastructure? Because I know there's going to be some boundary issues around the concept. Let me be absolutely clear. I know this is not a big group. Let me be absolutely clear on this. Now, Professor Yu mentioned many good examples of nature-based solution, right? Instead of using a canal, use a wild river with some ecosystem and some biodiversity. Those are nature-based solutions. Those are very important. Asia, Africa, developing countries are going to spend trillions of dollars on infrastructure. If everything comes in the form of concrete and steel, the risk to the world, the risk ecological system is way too high. So a lot of that has to come through nature-based solutions. That's number one. Now, if I be a little bit provocative, right? If we have all the nature-based solution, but if we fail to save the nature in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa, no amount of nature-based solution at the urban level, at the county level, is going to help us. So nature as infrastructure, fundamentally, is an even larger concept of preserving humanity's regulatory dependence, provisioning dependence on, and biodiversity dependence on nature. So again, where are the key areas where the battle has to be won? Southeast Asia, you saw yourself, the orangutans, the mangroves, and so on. Sub-Saharan Africa, lots of biodiversity, lots of biomass there that has got to be protected. And Latin America, and that is where I want to make a sharp distinction of what is nature-based solution versus nature as infrastructure. I hope that provocative distinction is sharp. Yeah. Second small little point I want to make to Professor Yu is that I try to avoid the word saying that nature is free. I don't think nature is free. I think if you destroy nature, it is not going to be free. In fact, it's very costly. What I try to express is that nature services are unpriced. So nobody is paying, but doesn't mean it's free. We need to spend money to maintain, conserve, and protect it so that it can continue to give us those services. It is unpriced. So finding a way to price what is unpriced can create more incentives and can create more markets out of it. I do not have all the answers, but I hope that little distinction is important and hopefully clarifies things. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, JP and Professor Yu. And I think, I mean, both of you really highlight the importance of pricing the ecosystem services of nature, including carbon sequestration, but biodiversity conservation is another one, climate adaptation is a third one. So I do hope that, you know, this kind of experience that you have from China and also from the AIF could, over time, translate into the decision makers in MDBs, but also governments, you know, including our own MDB, when we evaluate the projects according to their economic return. And now let me move on back to Dr. Charles Karangwa. And I want to ask you, you know, based on what you have heard here from the global north and south, financing, design communities, how do you think that we can, and you're linked to all of this because you're kind of the knowledge hub, how do you think that we can work together better as a world to promote the use of nature-based solutions, but at the same time not confusing it with nature as infrastructure and acknowledging it that NBS is not a panacea? Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks. I'm privileged actually to to respond to that question, and having also FD and here, FD is we call them a champions of nature-based solutions globally because they really took a risk to fund and finance this particular concept, including the IUCN global standards, which is great. And I want to invite you, actually, before I respond to Sandy's question, myself, I would be sitting like you listening to Professor Yu, who will now put it into visual what he talked about. So you'll be able to see those cases. Then Marie will be speaking that meeting, this afternoon session, sorry, and Sunny as well. So I will be absolutely be happy to sit down and listening to that. And it's going to be quite amazing, mostly talking about scaling up financing for these solutions. So please be at the IUCN Pavilion at 2:30 to listen to this great panelist. Now, let me go to that. The mistake we have seen happening, which have affected the scale of nature-based solutions, has been that everyone wants to be expert in everything. We are losing the sense of partnership because financial institutions are trying to become scientists and try to work on science. That's not their role. We have scientists somewhere. Of course, we need science in the banks, indeed. But we could outsource where the science is in the faculty like the one that the professor is leading. Financial institutions are trying to become gurus of mobilizing communities. They will fail because that's not of they are not social scientists. They need social scientists to design a strategy, but implementation should be done by NGOs and the civil society, and they have a role to play there. And that happens to us as well as international organizations. We want to become financial hubs. How do we do that? It's not our bread and how do you say it? It's not our strength to do that, bread and butter. And I believe this conversation here is a very good demonstration of how do you bring together the science that leads on facts, best practices, and know-how, bring the money where the money is, bring the innovation and policy influence from us as international organizations, and take those actions together, because that's then you're able to scale up. That's the first. I think innovating partnership would absolutely add value to these transformative efforts we are trying to achieve to address climate change, biodiversity loss, poverty, and pollution and other crises that we are seeing. And there's a whole cost, economic cost, and I'm glad GT is here as an economist. I'm also an economist. We have, many economists have already done the cost of working in silos. It's huge. It's a lot of cost. It's basically a lot of losses when you work in silos because you can't leverage anymore. Normally, capital should leverage grants. That's how you make a project bankable. Let's think about some of these projects. And I have seen a couple of them in IUCN because we are managing blended finance. We are working with a technical assistance facility with equity and other instruments. The success has been that there are things that needs absolutely investing grants and technical support for a project to become a bankable and give that value. And we need to develop with those more, work together. And I mentioned earlier, together with Peking University and other very credible organizations, we're starting an innovation hub on how we can scale up support to financial institutions of this NBS design and doing de facto kind of things around that. But more importantly, there is a whole work that policymakers need to do as well. I think everything you're talking about here, when you go in a national context, you still need to respond to a national policy framework. And there's still a lot of work that we need to do to continue working with the governments to harmonize these policies. There's still a silo between agriculture and environment that is continuing to affect how land and biodiversity and degradation is perceived. We are losing a huge amount of wetlands because they are being converted into agricultural farms. And that's a cost of this natural, beautiful infrastructure that we are losing. And the more we lose that, the more we pay the cost of managing and rebuild what has been destroyed by losing those environments. And so I wanted to put that. So there's that opportunity we have to bring, of course, policymakers, financial institutions, civil society organizations, communities, the science together to innovate, to think. These are problems that we have not been living in before. They are new. They are continuing to be new. The floods used to be manageable. Now they are no longer manageable. We need science to understand how do we predict. We need knowledge, traditional knowledge. How did you manage this before? And that can only happen if we sit around the table and break those silos and use leverage on each other's knowledge. And of that, of course, leverage on finance as well. Climate finance will require both different instruments, and none of those instruments can work in silos. Development of finance can only do this much. We need the private sector to bring in private investment as well. But also we need grants just to come in and do things differently. So I think that probably could help in achieving a transformative, hopefully, impact on nature and biodiversity aspect.
Thank you, Charles, and really for your wise words, because I think you mentioned, I like the concept of economic cost of working in silos, because that is something we do way too often. In the case of climate, it took us, I think, about 10 years, if not more, to kind of break the silos and mainstream climate into from environmental ministries to finance and planning ministries, and the same thing has happened within our own bank over time. And I think we should learn from that and do this in a better, more efficient way for nature and faster. And the fact that we are sitting here together today, notably with you on the other side representing knowledge and scientists, and us on this side representing the finance, is a good start. So I'm aware that we're running over time, so I just want to invite everyone to perhaps in 30 seconds tell us their key messages and what they would like to perhaps advise the audience and the rest of the audience online, as well as ourselves to do in order to do better in this field. Please.
30 seconds. Number one, these solutions we are talking about can only be effective if we absolutely approach that with high integrity. We need integrity in nature-based solutions. We need integrity in nature infrastructure. We cannot just claim to do it and we are not doing it. And to do that, the standard is key. We have offered as an organization the global standard for nature-based solutions and nature infrastructure. So it's available for free. You can use it, absolutely.
Well, it's for free, but not necessarily free.
Unpriced.
Yeah, I totally unpriced, invaluable. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, 30 seconds. So climate change, when climate change, everything needs change, right? Yeah. Into human being. So climate change, cultural as adaptation to our environment. So when climate change, culture needs change. Infrastructure is the major culture of humanity. When we urbanize it, we need the infrastructure. But for hundreds of years, Industrial Revolution has invented this kind of great infrastructure, which will fail or failed already. So you financial institute, are you going to keep investing in this kind of infrastructure, or you have alternative, which is nature? That will be sustainable, will be resilient, will be a new cultural adaptation to a new climate. That's my 30 seconds.
Thank you, Professor Yu. Dr. Tia.
I have 3 messages, 2 serious one and 1 fun one. nature is the infrastructure of life. Danny Alexander said that. I agree. Nature is too big to fail, and we mustn't let it fail. Number 3 is a fun message. Consider giving up your latte every day and direct financing towards nature-based solutions.
Thank you. 5 messages, but it will be short. The first one is that I'm convinced, and we are convinced at AFD, that we absolutely need to work together. I mean, donors, government, local authorities, civil society, scientists, but also private sector. Second message, it's important to demonstrate and to prove that projects based on with NBS are efficient, but also to assess the co-benefits of this project. And of course, donors are not scientists, but I believe that we can contribute to demonstrate the importance of NBS and the results of NBS. For example, in 2022, we financed 18 projects with NBS component, and it can be part of the evaluation, or actually we can share these materials. My third message is for governments and local authorities. It's important also to work on incentives and regulation. My fourth message is you mentioned local communities and citizen participation. It's absolutely necessary to take citizen participation into account when we mention and when we work on NBS. And the fifth message is for donors. It's absolutely necessary to provide grants for project preparation, but also to work on the risking of the investment.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. Well, we ran 10 minutes over time, so I would like to invite the audience to please thank the distinguished panelists for their interventions, and also thank you for staying with us until the end.
Thank you for staying.